Hi guys, welcome to Archimarathon. Ethical housing, super easy to produce.
What's ethical housing?
Roll intro.
What's ethical housing? Roll intro. Roll intro.
Just change the subject. Change the subject. We're in Madrid at the moment. We're here, we've just done Spain-Portugal tour with an amazing group of people. And Kevin and I were walking along and we were reflecting on Rob Adams from the city of Melbourne, who gave a series of talks and wrote.
There's a TED Talk link there.
Check it out. Ethical housing is not really that hard.
What is ethical housing though?
Well, ethical housing is, one of the basic human rights. You've got a right to food and electricity and clean drinking water, and housing is a human right. And he pointed out that in Melbourne, so he was from the city of Melbourne, we're from Melbourne, that we have severe housing crisis going on. And to solve that, if you just did what's around, this is just a standard street in Madrid. This is just the everyday street. If you just went and put 6, maybe 7-story buildings continuously and created these beautiful laneways and streets that we're walking through right now, you would solve the housing crisis overnight. And we don't just see it in Madrid, we see it in Barcelona, but we also see it in so many European countries. We also see it in Chicago and New York and parts of Melbourne, like De Graves Lane.
The older parts.
Yeah. Now we're plagued with sort of these bureaucratic responses. Build a 3-story street wall, setback, upper levels are assessed, which pulls people away from the street, decreases the amount of passive surveillance into the street.
What is passive surveillance?
So passive surveillance, great question.
I'm like always asking questions.
Great question, Kevin. Passive surveillance means that instead of having security cameras and things like that to stop terrible things happening on the street, what you do is
Which is too late by the time
the damage is done.
Yeah.
And the design has failed. Passive surveillance means that you have lots going on the street, but when the shops close and the bars close and the restaurants close,
someone up there could respond.
Can actually hear something going on, looks down, passively
Yell
looks
at
into
them.
that space.
Oi!
Yeah. And so that's passive surveillance, which means I'm living my life, but I can actually passively, without paranoia, see what's happening in the street, and people in the street that may be there to do no good know that there's all these people that live there. So easy. It's been done so often. I implore everybody to look at this episode of The School of Life, where Elaine de Botton talks about how easy it is to template housing. That's what a few of us are trying to do in Melbourne right now. And guess what? The shocking thing is, as Elaine de Botton points out, it doesn't require architects.
No.
It doesn't. Like, what you need is a good, commercial space at the ground level, 5, maybe 6 stories above of housing, and then add some cultural elements, some decoration to it, but not that much. It doesn't have to be, a museum. It doesn't have to be revolutionary, and you don't need architects to do it. But the reality is at the moment, especially in Australia, the only people doing it are architects.
You notice there's actually a lot of cars going past.
Yeah.
So they can coexist. We can coexist with cars.
Exactly. But guess what? There's no gutters.
And bikes.
The bikes, there's lots of transport options. There's no gutters. And look at what the cars are driving on. They're driving on pavers. So it's annoying under their tyres, so it slows them down. It creates a noise that signals people.
Well, wait. That's electric.
So electric cars that are silent, you can actually hear it, but there's no gutters, so people naturally drift across it. It doesn't differentiate between what is pedestrian and what is car. And why is that important? What about safety and all that? What's important is that the more that you define a strict car space, the more that pedestrians don't use it and they get isolated and shoved to the side more and more.
Also look at the distance between two sides of the street. It's very human. It's very beautifully proportioned. This is like 1-to-2 ratio, width 1 wide and 2 high. But there's a lot of details on the street where the signs and things that really kind of bring it down to human level.
Yep.
Instead of like larger, taller high rises, you almost require much wider streets to accommodate that.
There's remarkable statistics, health statistics about housing. If you have to travel really far to your work from your home, if you live in a sparse, disconnected community, like the not only mental health problems, but also the physical health, that you end up living a more sedentary life if you live in a less dense area.
Car.
And so your health outcomes, the outcomes of your citizens, is compromised. Before, said you don't need architects, but architects are doing it at the moment in Melbourne. Well, who do you need? Who do you need to make good housing happen?
Decision makers.
Yep, policy makers. It's actually a legislative problem. If we had, it should happen on a federal level, but if we can have councils that instead of worrying so much about the NIMBYs, not in my backyard, usually cashed up old boomers that want to protect the value of their properties and don't want to water it down with increased density, if we can have policymakers saying, you know what, it is fine to have a 7-story sheer wall, because look at it, it's not offensive. It is fine to have that and to create a little bit of extra shadow because there's also a ton of light, especially in Australia this works. The policymakers could actually, as Rob Adams pointed out, could solve it overnight. Architects aren't there causing trouble because they're designy wankers. They just seem to be at the moment the only people putting their hands up to take the risk to try and force some change. And they're not doing it out of greed. They're doing it because they come to places like this, they travel to learn, and they discover that, oh my God, for hundreds of years, some other places have been doing it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel.
But Andrew, but all the people worried about, oh, but I'm living too close to my neighbours. Culturally, you know, they're not used to. They just want like their fence, they want their guns.
Privacy, this weird thing, we've talked about it in multiple episodes. It is so misunderstood. You need your privacy, but you also need to overlap with your neighbours. They might be dickheads, but guess what? Most people are actually okay. And you know what the dickheads teach us? Tolerance. You notice, like the cars, the bikes, the people are just on top. Nobody's beeped a horn. Coexisting, isn't that weird as a community? 1, 2, 3, 4. Some of them are around this area, 4 or 5. There's 7 over there. Look, on the thinner streets, they still fit in a tree. So on one side, on the wider streets, 2 trees. Paving across, look how slowly this car's going. Guess what they do when they get near me? They slow down, weird. And then you've got this one, where they're just establishing some trees. But the same paving goes from wall to wall.
No curbs.
No curbs.
There are indicators, I guess, to a sense of like, okay, that's where you walk if the car's around, just to be super safe.
Yep. I like to think of it, the way they've designed it is that's where you retreat. So if a car comes, you go, well, I retreat, they don't know what's there.
Yep.
But then you naturally drift back out. This is a road, yeah? And then look at the balconies. So the balconies are these beautiful, like, so basically you just got windows, and they're classical proportioned windows, and then these little balconies, and people inhabit it however they want.
A lot of them have shutters, the ability to completely shut out.
So protecting from the externally from the sun, externally to the glass. We've talked about this before in other
And
episodes.
noise, potentially.
And
These all
soffits.
shuttered.
Yeah, so these are businesses that will open later tonight, so it's siesta time. Sensible people, not like us, are having a nap right now. Tiled under the balcony, so soffits. Look at this episode. We've ranted about soffits. So when you look up from the community urban space, you see something beautiful. Stone on this side.
Some of them are beautiful tiles. We haven't seen any. Straight away, I'll find some.
So our message is, and I say this with all sincerity, it's really easy. Good ethical housing. This is sustainable housing too. Living close together makes it sustainable. Thermal mass and managing that. Managing the sun. It all is a sustainable tactics.
Yeah, look at these louvers. Like actual, not fake glued-on louvers that do nothing. They actually do help.
And later
protect.
tonight, when the sun comes down and the temperature shifts, they'll open those up and they'll open their windows and they'll vent their houses. Because they know how to manage passively. Because it's cultural. Our message is, it's actually bloody easy. What we need is policymakers to get on a plane and come and hang out in some of these spaces. We don't need invention. Like the amount of time that what we're doing in Melbourne has been described as innovation is crazy. Because all we've done is borrowed from this area. Look at the soffit. How generous is that to put tiles on
the
something
underside
that you look up at? We can do this, Australia. We're almost there. councils, state governments, federal governments, really easy steps in your legislative plans, and this stuff becomes templated and easy to churn out. Look at this episode, School of Life, Elaine de Botton.
So no architects needed. What's the takeaway from that? What's in our interest?
What's in our interest? Well, I still like Vokes Peters, the guys from Brisbane, amazing architects, who described good architecture. You know, a good architect is somebody who first and foremost is a custodian of great learned ideas. Yeah? Unfortunately, in the current paradigm of education, architectural education, is we're all meant to be geniuses. Yeah? We're all meant to do the Guggenheim over and over and over again. We're all meant to be Zaha Hadid and Frank Gehry and Rem Koolhaas. I love their point, which is first and foremost be a custodian of good ideas. So if these are templated that don't require architects, who knows how to do it? Let's as architects learn how to provide really good housing. Let's be backed up by councils.
These ones have little winter gardens. And guess what? Despite the heat now, Madrid gets cold. Colder than Melbourne.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I can't believe that because it's so hot.
Yeah, well, Melbourne gets hot.
It does. Oh, they are beautiful winter gardens. So basically, in winter, that acts as a little greenhouse. So you can have the glazing on the outside and then you can just store up a whole heap of heat and let it into your house. But in summer, it does the opposite. Like you can basically just protect it and then vent out of it to keep your house cool. Look, everybody's, like it's exactly, like how boring, really. Look at that boring glazing and that boring handrail, repeated over and over. But guess what happens when you keep it simple for people? They inhabit it in their own unique way. At the Village and Park Life, we see this. People are taking these pretty standard balconies and they're inhabiting it in amazing ways. Leave room as an architect for community to inhabit a space.
Age-old ideas.
It's all been done before. Everything's a remix. See that episode.
Like Kirby Ferguson.
Poor Kev, that's all I've been doing this whole trip. Soon we're going to have automated cars and this will all be gone and this can change.
Yeah, we were just seeing some streets have changed.
We don't need to be anti-cars. What we need to do is keep them in their place. These were open before, now they're closed because it's hot and it's siesta time, and later on this street will be going off. And the neighbours will love it. They won't complain. It's just another street. Look how amazing it is, but it's just another street here. Hashtag, it's not that hard. And if you plan streets this way, cocaine starts growing out of the footpath. Thanks for watching. Do you guys agree that, like, really, it's not hard? The problem we've got in Melbourne and Australia is we're actually fighting the legislation. The legislation works against good housing.
But what is the legislation there for then?
Exactly, to protect NIMBY boomers.
What's NIMBY?
Not in my backyard. Is that true? Bite me. Put it in the comments. Let's have a fight about it. Do we need architects? I think we do, because we're trained not only with all of these design ideas, but hopefully with somewhat of an ethical backbone. What do you guys reckon? We honestly want to hear from you, and we want to solve the housing crisis. We want your help. We implore you, please watch this TED Talk by Rob Adams. Yeah?
How to increase Melbourne's population, double their population, with 7% of the land.
And not by compromising things, but by making things better. We can do it.
Cops are coming for you.
What? Bail me out, please, Kev. Can you bail me out of prison?